Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. I'm your host, David Tran. I'm the co-founder of Xfusion.io and as well as the co-host of this show. Today I'm joined by Felix, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Axya. Thanks for joining us in the show.
Thank you, David.
So I've noticed you spent some time at a variety of accelerators. Can you walk me through some of those experiences and what you learned from them?
Yeah, definitely. So the company was founded here in Montreal in Canada. And one of the accelerator we did is called Santec. So it's associated with the University of ETS, an engineering school. And the thesis there was that a lot of engineers were joining company and leaving with great ideas. So what they wanted to do was to build an accelerator for those engineers to start those companies, have support for hiring, funding, and everything, and bring them to a certain level of maturity. So we did that accelerator with some of my co-founders. And when we joined the accelerator, we had only a PowerPoint, a good idea, and we were ready to change the world. Thanks to their support, we incorporated the company, got our first clients, and all of that over a time span of 12 weeks. So that was Santec. It was really like from an idea to early companies and really the beginning. After that, they have a 2-year incubation program where they provide funding, access to the first office, other services, but it's really an incubation period. And during that, we also joined the program called Next AI, focused on AI companies, and it's another 12-week program, I think. So at the end of that program, we were pitching to investors. We were showcasing the new technology that we developed during those weeks. So that was another great accelerator program. And the last one that we did that is super important to mention is CDL. So it's Creative Destruction Lab. That one is all across Canada, US, and they have different hubs. So we were part of the supply chain hub. And I'm not sure how long that one lasted, but we had exposure to mentors, investors, and it really helped us to scale the business to the next phases. So the 3 program I mentioned were over a 2-year time frame. So that's the quick summary of the accelerator we made.
How did you hear about the first one? Because I think a lot of students usually just go through school without ever thinking about accelerator programs.
Yeah, so I was a student at ETS, but I wasn't aware of Santec. What actually happened is that with my co-founder, we did some hackathon for fun. So I have a mechanical engineering background, and he was a PhD candidate in artificial intelligence with a focus on neuroscience. And for us, hackathon was just like a weekend, free pizza, t-shirts, and you can really work on problem solving. So we did that maybe during a few months without thinking about entrepreneurship or it wasn't a business opportunity. It was just like problem solving, just fun with other similar individual. And one of that competition led to a larger competition called Aqua-Hacking, which is over a 6-month period. There you have some funding, some expert, and we're building a technology that was forecasting combined sewage overflow. So we were leveraging available database, and it was more of a tech product than an actual company. But at the end of that competition, we were among the 5 best team. So we got transferred to the Santec Accelerator. And that was how we got to know that great program. And when we joined, we had, again, that PowerPoint, that idea, but it wasn't a business opportunity. And we met other founders with similar background, like they made some user discovery, they had a great idea. We merged the team together, and that's how we founded Axya.
So I'm familiar with a lot of accelerator programs that are generally in the range of 12-ish weeks. You mentioned one of them being a 2-year incubation period. Is that a typical length for a company to incubate? And how is that 2-year split? Because I imagine that 12 weeks is really intense, but I don't really know if you can sustain that level of intensity over the course of 2 years.
Yeah, definitely. So the first 12 weeks is really focused on specific elements such as sales, building a pipeline, basic of financial, because some of us don't have a financial background, so we need to learn basis. Same thing with tech, really high level, how to develop a product or a company that is product driven, those type of things. So specific workshop with mentors or expert, whatever is required. So that's over 12 weeks. And as you mentioned, it's super intense. It can be like 4 or 8 hours during a day. We have some specific events, so demo day, pitch contest, those types of things. So in that program, with over 150 candidates, they only take 30 companies. And out of the 30 companies, around 8 to 10 graduate from the program and have access to that 2-year incubation. But that 2-year incubation period is more like a list of services that you can access, also an office and those type of things. And it's way less intensive. There's actually no things that are obligatory. You don't need to attend any of the activities. It's more like a support that they provide. So that's why it's over 2 years of time span. And as they say, we need to focus on the business rather than attending some workshop or those type of things.
Can you give me a breakdown of where your company was at, either like product-wise or idea-wise, at the end of the first one compared to what you were able to achieve in that 2-year span?
Yeah. So when we joined the Accelerator, as I mentioned, we merged with another team. So we had a pitch deck that we used as a product demo. So nothing was coded yet. And we were visiting companies and selling them the big idea and asking for $500 check to be part of the waiting list to join the beta phase.
I see.
So at the end of the product, at the end of the 12-week program, we had nothing coded yet, but we had, I think, 30 companies that joined the beta, the waiting list. So we got a grant at the end of that program, and with that grant, we hired the first intern, and we started to really code the platform that we were selling. So when we finished that program, nothing was coded. We just had customer validation in the form of check. And after that, during the 2-year, we launched the beta, then we launched the full platform, and we now have almost 1,000 users from Quebec, Ontario, even some in the US. And the product evolved a lot because we integrated some AI component, some advanced analytics, and other type of things. So it really went from nothing to enterprise-ready product.
And you mentioned there was a step where you merged with another team. Is that a common experience?
I wouldn't say common, but the program is made to, it's survival of the fittest. So if alone you cannot survive, you'd rather join another team. And in this case, it was a great merger because our experience were complementary. So the 2 guys that we joined had no technical background, while my co-founder was a PhD in artificial intelligence. So the 4 of us were able to bring the company to a level of maturity that allowed us to access the next program. While if we stayed split, I don't think that neither of us would have graduated from that program.
Did you was that something they proposed or something you proposed? How did you make sure the personalities meshed well, your values were aligned?
That's really funny because at the first session, there was everyone sitting in the stairs, and randomly we just sat together. So we had a small chat and hey, I want to go have lunch afterward. Congrats on joining the program. So it was just by accident or it was just random. We got to know each other, and when they talked about the user discovery that they did and what they want to do, I'm like, hey, I experienced that problem firsthand with my previous job at Bombardier, so I know exactly what you're trying to do. And we knew that they needed some tech background, so maybe Yassine could help them. And after 4 weeks, hey, let's try to just join force and work together. And that was the best decision that we could have taken.
It's kind of cool to hear these stories of people who, I'm assuming you didn't have you didn't know each other prior to that event, right?
Yeah, not at all. So, and even my co-founder was I would say a friend, but it wasn't a business relationship that we had. We used to go to those hackathons for fun. I haven't really worked on anything serious with him. The longer that we worked were a few weekends, then we did the longer program, but it was more of a project side project than an actual business. So we've learned to work together in a specific environment, and it was a great fit. I think that communication is one of our strengths. We're able to identify issues and speak in a candid way. So we're super comfortable pinpointing potential improvement. Not everyone is comfortable with that type of relationship, but for us, that's how we build the foundation of the company, and we were always able to identify improvement or issues. And that's how we've learned to work together.
I imagine during that 2-year period, not only do you just build the product and build the vision, but you also build like the company culture, right?
Definitely, and that's something that we stumble upon. I love reading. I read as much as possible, and I've read a few great books where they mention culture. And I remember that at the time I had no idea of what culture was, because you're a team of 4 or 5 people. So yes, you understand those big concepts and like, oh, culture is when you're not there, how people behave and those type of things. But talking about culture and building an actual one is 2 different things. And during one of the Accelerator, they mentioned culture, and I was like, oh, that's super important. We need to implement core values at Axya. It will be super useful. So I remember doing that first presentation to the team. I've worked with the co-founder, and like, those are our core values. That's the mission. That's the vision. And I present this to everyone. Nobody asked question. And after that, I talked with them like, hey, so what did you think about the presentation? Like, we don't understand what you're talking about. So
at least they're honest.
Honest. And one of them, like 4 months later, was like, now that I see what you, the founder, built with that culture, I'm amazed by how visionary you were 4 months ago to do that presentation and start to like talk about those elements. And I've read another good quote about cultures. When you're tired of repeating the culture, you're halfway done. So we put a lot of emphasis on that maybe after the first year. And from there, we just start to building, and people empower it, and we describe it, write it down, iterate, and on a quarterly basis, we review our core values and those type of things. So it was one of our strengths, and it wasn't on purpose that we did that. We didn't knew at the time that would become one of the strengths, but currently we're hiring a lot of people and engineers, especially software engineers, and it's hard to hire them. And a lot of them reported that they're joining the company specifically for that culture. So that was a great move that we did without knowing how far it would bring us.
So what was the first point where you're like, culture is important, let's spending a good amount of our focus on it now? And what were some of the initial pieces that you laid down that are still standing today as it relates to your company's culture?
So I read a great book called Traction by Gino Wickman. And it's all about how to create an infrastructure to allow the company to be hyper-focused and effective. Because sometimes you feel that you're working on things, you don't get the results, and you don't have visibility on what's happening and those type of things. So one of the elements that you need to put in place is those core values that will help you to take decision either for hiring, firing, but also who you're working with and how you should behave internally. And when we started to set up those things, because one of the examples they give in the book is a company that doubles in size every year. And we're like, that's what we want to do. We want to be that type of company. And that company reports saying that core value were super important, that structure. So we said, if we want to be like them, if that was helpful for them, we need to put the same infrastructure in place. And that was one of the best decisions that we took, because from that day, we've seen like a huge shift in productivity. And now that I look back, I'm like, how were we operating? We had no system in place, no infrastructure. Well, actually, not like that one. So that was really like the drive. We want to be a fast-growing company. Those things are important. And I think like 6 months after that, I read the Netflix culture book. It's now one of the required reading for the management team. And they really put in some word and some concept over what we already built. So it just added more flesh around the bone and the infrastructure that we put in place.
Is that the book with the title something along the lines of like the no rules rule? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
they put a lot of, one of the most important thing that we've learned in that book is talent density. So if you want to build a fast growing company, your first hire become your promoter afterward, and they're the one who champion the culture. So it really changed the way we view hiring, because at first we were bootstrapping, don't have a lot of capital, but hiring qualified individual is cheap because it costs you less, they're more effective, more things get done. So that was a paradigm shift that happened on our side. Like starting now, we just hire the best, and if they're more expensive, then we raise more capital. We review how we spend, but let's make sure that we get the best one. And it really accelerated the company, and it's one of the best decisions that we took also.
So what are some of your top cultural values today? Like when you look to hire, promote, and like I guess encourage behaviors within your team, what do you try to optimize for?
So the most important thing for us, we have like individual core value, then we have company core values, well, team core values, and then company core value. And the first one is data driven. We are a data platform. We look at the user behavior, we extract that information, and this allows us to take decisions. So everything needs to be data driven. Otherwise, we don't see how you can take a decision. Intuition is great, but to identify the data to take that decision. So first one is data driven, and this attracts a lot of engineer and software developer, and even people from a background that are less engineer-like. So we have someone in design that is super data-driven. She cares about like what kind of metric behavioral things she can measure and those type of things. So data-driven, and if you're data-driven, then you can be focused and lean. So that's the other thing. How can you make sure that you work on the right thing, iterate fast enough? So that lean definition comes from the Lean Startup. Another great book that we recommend everyone in the company to read, but is a core reading for the management. So really being data driven, then focus and lean. And after that, we have a lot of values around transparency, communication and collaboration, being honest and transparent. But all those things require you to be data driven. That's how you can trust your peers. And then if you have trust, everything can be shared, everything is fully transparent. So we really created that type of organization. And as a remote company, we're fully remote, you require those type of infrastructure, those way of communicating. So we really made sure that all the information is available for everyone. So those are the main pillars of our culture. And as I mentioned in the track, specific type of talent, which fit the needs of the company. So it was, it forged itself naturally because of the way we behave, and then it attracted people that we actually need. So it's a good consequence of that.
Can you elaborate on how you look at individual values versus team values? Like, what's the distinction in how you view them when you're within Axya?
Yeah, so the individual values, for example, being data-driven is the way you work on your individual project or type of things. And it's super important that naturally you behave that way. Otherwise, you won't enjoy your time at Axya because you'll be requested to make some reports. You'll be challenged on why you did something. And if giving data for a justification is not natural for you, it won't be
I see.
great. So that's the individual aspect, data-driven, being super focused, problem solver at heart. We're looking for that. That's how we started the company. We're a problem solver. We're super excited about challenges. When we see a problem, we actually see an opportunity, and we're trying to find the root cause of that problem. So those are the individual value, but then you work in a team. So how do you work in a team? You need to be fully transparent. You need to communicate properly, and you need to be honest in whatever interaction that you have. So that's more on the
I see.
company interaction and team. And finally, the purpose of the company is to fulfill our user needs. So it's clients are first-class citizen, and that's the top priority to fulfill them. So I think that's something you're familiar with because that's exactly what your company's purpose is. But again, different objectives. So as an individual, how do you solve problems? How do you approach situation? as a team, how do you collaborate, and as a company, what are we trying to achieve?
So you've listed, you've listed a few books already. They Knows Rules, Traction, and how many other required reading books are there within your company?
So for the management, we have the Lean Startup, which is really the thinking, especially for engineering people. We tend to over-optimize. We tend to make sure that it's the perfect version before you release it, and it's a big issue because sometimes the ideal feature takes way less time than what you would do, and the other that by iterating with the customer, you can get to an ideal product way faster. So Lean Startup is a required reading. The other one is Measure What Matters, so the book about OKRs. So it's a system that we put in place. It's pretty similar to Traction, which is the other required reading. And the final one is No Rules from Netflix. We might add more books, but those we really feel that they're the core. We also have a lot of recommended reading about team collaboration, motivation, go-to-market, those type of things. Different things are highlighted there, but the 4 books that I mentioned are required because that's how we operate as a company. So the management need to read those. And we also have a policy internally that we pay for any books that people would like, any books or any course. It's important because we are people that are passionate about what we're doing. We're always trying to improve ourselves, and we're trying to learn. So we pay for those books. So any employee who would like to read those books, we ship it to their place. We just ask for a short report afterward about what they've learned to share that with the rest of the company and motivate them to learn more. So that's how we approach reading at Axya.
Do you have any books that you can name off the top of your head on that recommended list that aren't necessarily required?
Crossing the Chasm, super important about those different phases. It's a book about marketing and sales and how different subset of your potential clients behave. And one of the objectives is to work with the early adopters to learn about the behavior. And after that, access like the majority of potential clients. Super important for sales and marketing related job. Another one that we really like is Drive by Daniel Pink, which explains motivation. So you can be passionate about what you do, but if the environment where you're working is not properly set up, you can impair that motivation. That helped us to create incentive, how we pay. For example, we don't have commission for sales. We've learned that structure in this book because we work as a team, so it doesn't make sense that a portion of the company get specific incentive based on what happened with the users, while the product team also makes sure that the users have an ideal experience. So we went from something that was more, no incentive for a specific division. Another one that we really like is Peopleware. So that was written by 2 consultants who were studying team collaboration in large organization, and they identify a few misconceptions about collaboration and those type of things. So we learned a lot through that book, and that was really important because in a remote environment, you need to create infrastructure on purpose. You have less things that happen, let's say, randomly, because you need to set up those environments. So, for example, at Axya, we don't use Slack, we use Discord, which is the same infrastructure, but we have a Discord server for work-related discussion with specific channels and like a lot of structure there. And we have another that we call Social Lounge, where we have the current employees, but former ones also, and other contributors, and it's not related discussion to really create that environment. So we were able to create a collaborative and fun environment, even though we are fully remote. So those are the type of things that you need to do on purpose, and reading books about collaboration and work environment was really helpful.
How large is your management team today?
So we make it a small distinction. We have the executive, and the role is to oversee the company as a whole with specific focus. So the CTO, CEO, and CEO. We are training the executive team, and we are supported by a team of 5 managers So they oversee specific division of the company. Finance, human relation, sales, product, and customer care. So those are the main divisions that we currently have. 3 executives, 5 managers, soon to be 6, and we together lead a team of 32 individuals in total.
How did you, if you were to go back 5 years, do you feel like you could have predicted where you are today?
Some elements.
Okay.
I could have predicted. I knew I needed to be in a really challenging environment where I would focus on problem solving. But at the time, my idea of problem solving and innovation was being an engineer in a large organization. I might have thought about leading teams or working in other environment, but I had no idea that I would be an entrepreneur and the CEO of a company. Not that way, but the problem solving and innovation aspect I knew it would be something along those lines.
Okay. Is it something, so what made you sure that, what was the point where you're like, yeah, I think I'm okay with being an entrepreneur? Because I think it takes a very specific type of person with a very specific risk profile to pursue that path.
Definitely, and I was always open to risk, and I was comfortable in that, but what drive me was solving problem and coming with the most efficient solution. And the most efficient solution is not always the one that takes the most time or is over-engineered. It's just I wanted to create change and create value for whoever were the end user. And I had the opportunity to work in a large organization in aerospace. So I worked for Bombardier and Airbus, which are amazing environment, and they create amazing product. But the speed of innovation wasn't the same one that I wished I could have. Of course, making change on an airplane can take months. So I needed an environment that had a faster pace. So when I discovered entrepreneurship through those hackathon and then the Accelerator, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I can think about a change, call a client, and within 4 hours, we identify a new improvement, and it's accepted because we are only a team of 5 individuals, and it goes way faster. So I stumbled upon entrepreneurship, but it resonated with what I was actually looking for.
Okay. And it's interesting that the business that you decided to build is a marketplace, because marketplaces by nature are highly complex, because you need to make sure that you don't just have one customer, there's like multiple parties. How did you get started with, which side of the marketplace did you start with, and how did you start making contact with people in that space?
So my co-founder, so for those of you who are listening, it's a marketplace in the manufacturing industry. So we help buyers from companies like Airbus find the right suppliers who are machine shops. So I worked on the buyer side. My co-founder worked in machine shop before, so we already had a network there. So what we did, we built a supply at first, and that's how we onboarded the first users. And then once we had 30 suppliers, we started to call buyers and say, hey, we have a big network of suppliers. At the time, we thought that 30 was big. So we called them to say, would you like to find a digital supplier? So you just connect online, you can access them. And at first, some of the early adopters were excited with that opportunity, but we heard a lot of clients say, well, real business need to be made in person. In the manufacturing industry, you go meet your clients, you take the plane, you see how they're working, and it needs to be done in person. I did not agree with that. Neither my co-founder did. And fast forward a year later, COVID hit, and everyone's like, how can you find your suppliers online? How can you really solve that problem? So one of the key success for companies is timing. It's something that is outside of our grasp, but in our case, timing was perfect. And so the adoption was highly accelerated by those events that were outside of our control. So to answer your question, supply first, then added some buyers, and then the environment or the setup made that people were looking for our technology, and that's how we scaled both sides.
Did you just send a bunch of emails? How did you reach out to suppliers at scale?
Cold call, that was the best thing. Okay. It's a good learning experience. I recommend any founders to get on the phone and call. And one of our mentors scaled his business and his own like career by doing cold calls. Like it's you don't want to do it. Sometimes people hang up on you. It's not fun, but that's the best way to learn about your customers. And if you don't learn about your customers, how can you build the right product?
Right.
Now, if you don't build the right product for the right people, there's no real business. So we were challenging ourselves. My co-founder and I were in the same office, and it was who can make the most call. That was how we drive ourselves. And you call as much as possible, and over like a few months, that's how we got those 31st users. It was super excited. We learned a lot of things, just the way we pitched the business. At first, we had a super technical definition of like, oh, it's an online portal with a network of suppliers that you digitally, blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares. We'll learn to pitch the problem. Hey, are you looking for suppliers? We have access to a list of suppliers.
Yeah.
You can link us in a few clicks. Oh, that's more appealing for someone. Like, yeah, actually, I'm trying to find this and that. So we really like get on the phone. And at first, you mentioned like, are you sending emails and those type of things? In our industry, you need to talk with the individual. And I think it's pretty similar in a lot of industries.
Yeah, right.
Like the easy way out would have been like, oh, let's send some emails and wait for response, but that can take a few days. And I think that the open rate would have been really small, specifically for manufacturing clients.
I see.
But with the phone, you can do multiple iteration within a day. And so get on the phone, talk to your customers. That's the best advice I can give, and that's the best advice I received for us.
Who's the one who gave you that piece of advice?
Alexis Bourson from Fibre Noire. Like we used to meet with that mentor, and that was like he comes at Santec and he gives a workshop on sales, and he explained like how it's important to make those calls and how it changed his career, and like what happened for him. So really starting from the bottom, and now he was like general manager in like a huge public company here in Quebec, and like great success, but it was driven by that, like get on the phone and call your clients. So we book a meeting with him, like, hey, we'd like to talk about you and the business. He's like, yeah, sure, let's have a beer and we'll talk about it. And I remember we come into the bar, we sit with him, and I prepare some questions for him. Like, I want to learn more about those type of things. So we sit and he see that I'm preparing, like, I'm not coming here to talk about me. I'm here to help you with your business. And it's like, what are your main challenges? And he said, well, we cannot sell because we don't have a product. It's like, you don't need a product to sell. You need to call your clients, get on the phone and listen to what they're saying. And then you can sell something that they're actually looking for. So Alexis Bourson really shifted the company's mindset. And yep.
Do you know do you have a ballpark of how many people you've called at this point?
Thousands of people.
Thousands.
Yeah, thousands of people. And at the time, I think my highlight was like 80 or over 80 calls in a day.
Okay.
Of course, they were not all good. When we called some, I used to call some, how do you say where they repair your car? Like a garage in French. Where you go for your car. They don't.
Auto shop.
Yeah, exactly. They did not care about our solution at all. I think I solved all the repair in Montreal. I'm like, maybe one of them, it makes sense, but we've really called everyone we could in Quebec, in Ontario also, and that's how we build that knowledge, that network, and also that confidence that we're actually building something that people are looking for.
Okay. And so you went from an idea, you had, how did you know to plan for the funding component? Because I think funding is one of the areas where a lot of people have a great idea, maybe even a great team, but like they can fall flat if they're not able to get funding in time. Like, how did you learn how to raise funding?
So that was one of the things we've learned in Next Day Accelerator.
Okay.
They coached us on the timing and everything, and at the end of the Accelerator, there's a demo day. So you pitch a bunch of investors from Canada. Some of them were from the US, but in our case, the timing was perfect because a few months earlier, we just released our platform and we had some traction. So we went from 50 or 60 users to like 250 within the first month. And we had a good success story. So timing was on our side. We had a good traction, and we were raising the right amount for the right metric. That's another thing where I think you need coaching. You can read about it, but speaking with entrepreneurs that already raised and investors also, we were lucky to have investors as mentors that were really coaching the founders and not looking for an investment. Some of them ended up investing, but the most valuable thing that they did was to coach us. Like, yeah, you can try to raise 25 million with only 100K in AR, but it doesn't make sense in this particular setup. So they really coached us to set the right expectation, adapt the narrative, and the other important thing that they coached us to do was to run a process. Yes, you can pitch investors, but if you don't have specific objective, time frame, the material, those type of things, you might end up not being able to raise capital or raise capital, but with the terms that you're not looking for. So running a process, being properly coached, and timing and traction.
How do you know what terms are good and what terms are not good? I think is this the first company you raised money for?
Yeah, exactly. So we had access to a huge amount of databases. PitchBook is one of them. So I love data. I'm passionate about that. So I downloaded all the reports about our competitors, at what stage they were compared to us, what is the difference between US and Canada, what were the metrics, and I built my narrative around those metrics. So I knew that when they say, because you don't necessarily tell your valuation, but you know how much you're raising and how much dilution you're looking for. Right. So I understood afterward that all those numbers are like highly correlated. And I learned to position ourselves and understand what were the expectations in that specific environment. So that's how I came up with those numbers. The other thing, what we are actually trying to build, but you can look at your roadmap and you can build an infinite amount of stuff. So what will bring you from the stage that you're currently at to your next inflection point? How much capital do you need to achieve this? How much capital other companies needed to achieve this? So that's how I was able to triangulate. And again, mentors that already raised. So they were like, well, maybe 6 million for your first round is a lot. You should look for something like this. And here's where you should do the cut and those type of things. So triangulation, mentors' advice, and a lot of data.
Earlier, you were mentioning how your culture is the reason a lot of people join your company. How did you find the first set of employees to hire that weren't personally connected to yourself or your co-founders?
So by being in the Soundtech Accelerator, we had access to the interns from ETS, the engineering school that it connected. So we could make the job offer there, and it was well perceived from the students because we were in the Soundtech Accelerator. Otherwise, a startup might seem like risky. So that was kind of a way to credibilize the company. So we hired the first interns, and then we did some networking event, and I was attending as much networking event as possible, and that's how we were able to hire the first key employees. And at the time, it was just individuals that either love the team, love the product, and what we were trying to do. And one thing that we were highly promoting at the time was opportunities and education. We were really supporting individuals in their growth. So that's the reason why some of the early employees are still with us today. Really promote those type of things. But as we scaled, it was really through content that we output on either LinkedIn, some blogs. We contribute to some tech blogs. So those were the way that we put ourselves out there and explain how we operate. And it attracts some individual. Others are not attracted by this, but it allowed us to filter.
Self-selecting. Yeah,
exactly.
You just talked about posting some articles and some tech blogs. How'd you find those opportunities?
It's my co-founder who always consumed a lot of that type of content, and that was like, I can share a story that is that could be interesting for other individual. I'll share the link afterward. Okay. But he told the story about how he went from being a PhD to the CTO of a 20-something employees, and that shift appealed to other individuals who would like to become the CTO of a tech company. So by just sharing, and it was really well structured with a lot of insight and things. And from one article, you get to another one, and then it was a crash course in machine learning and those type of things, just because he's passionate about that and likes to share his learning.
Okay. Well, thank you, Felix. This has been a wonderful conversation. I also just want to be respectful of your time. I just want to end on one final question. For our audience who might be interested in either reaching out to you, applying to your company, following you in your journey, what's the best place they can do so?
LinkedIn, and especially for founders, I allocate some time in my schedule to talk with other founders, to share my experience, answer any question that they would have. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I'm sure David will give the links, or that information will be available. But if you want to talk about funding, culture, the shift between engineering and entrepreneurship, I'll be more than happy to answer any of those questions.
Sweet. Well, thanks again for joining us in the show.
Thank you for the invitation. That was a pleasure.